Okay, so let's get started. Let's switch to English. You know, we will again do CLIL, Content Language Integrated Learning. You are probably used to it, and those who joined us this year, you are I'm quite confident that you will get used to it. If you don't understand anything that I say, please ask. You can always ask questions in German, absolutely no problem. I'm really looking forward to this year, and we are going to kick off the year with Angular. So, you know the three technologies. Let's quickly recap again what I told you a few minutes ago. We will start the year with Angular, using the Angular technology and the TypeScript language to build single-page apps. Then we are going to transition to ASP.NET Core to build backend APIs. These backend APIs will then be consumed by Angular applications, so we will test Angular in conjunction with ASP.NET Core. You know both technologies from last year, so I assume that you still remember the basics, but this year we are going to dive deeper, and of course we are going to take a look at the latest and greatest features of the new Angular versions and the new ASP.NET Core versions, namely Angular 16 currently and .NET 8. Last but not least, in our curriculum, we also have desktop apps. So last but not least, we are going to use XAML and WPF to build desktop apps accessing the same database as the ASP.NET Core does. So again, we will try ASP.NET Core in conjunction with WPF, sharing a single database, sharing a data access layer. This is what we are going to do. And now it's a little bit loud outside. Thank you very much. Thank you for closing the door. So let's start with Angular. We are going to start with Angular, and the first thing that I would like you to do is an npm install @Angular. Oh, that's a little bit too large. So try it again. npm install @Angular CLI @latest, and also add -- global. I will show it to you immediately. Let's open a terminal. I think here I already have a terminal. npm install -- global @Angular/CLI @latest. So let me zoom in. This will give us the latest Angular CLI. Currently, the latest version of Angular is Angular 16. Angular 16 brought a bunch of news, very interesting things. The most important thing for our class and the final exam for you are signals. Signals revolutionize the work with Angular, and you are lucky. Because if you would have visited this school 2 years earlier, I would have to teach you a lot of details about a framework which is called RxJS, Reactive Extensions. We can keep that short this year and use Signal instead. And if you read the news about Angular, you will see that signals make your life much easier. The world is a better place with signals. I'm just kidding. Of course, it's just a developer preview, so signals are not ready for production yet. But hey, we are living on the edge here, right? So we are using the development preview, of course. Please execute this statement, and I will wait for a minute or two until everybody has finalized installing the latest version of the Angular CLI. You can also check it by calling ng -- version. Sorry, it's just version, not -- and it should tell you that we are on 16.2. Please verify that. Good. So everybody has Angular 16. That's good. Now, you will get some notes from my side, but mainly you will get sample code throughout this semester. The notes are in this notebook. It's available at... Let me quickly show you the URL. At this URL you can find the notes that I will put together for you. I switched to HackMD because I really like this platform. I will now copy this link to Discord, to your Discord server. so that you do not need to write it down. But now you have it on video too. So this is the link to the notes. It's already in Discord. Try to click on it. It should show you something like this one here on the right-hand side. Good. And here you again see the URL, or sorry, the command with which we updated Angular, and the tip that you should at least use the latest LTS version of Node long-term support. So if you don't have it already, 18 point something, please update to the latest LTS at home. Not necessary to do it now. Next one, Visual Studio Code. As you remember, hopefully, I hope your memory wasn't wiped during summer holidays. If it was, we use Visual Studio Code. Install it if you don't already have it. Make sure you have the latest version of Visual Studio Code. For instance, for me, the latest update hasn't been installed yet. I will immediately install it now. Installing updates right before a lesson is always a good thing. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, now I have the latest version of Visual Studio Code. Make sure that you also have the latest version of Visual Studio Code. And then make sure that you have the latest version of the Angular Essentials installed. We need the version 16. It's from a very famous web developer, John Papa. He creates this extension collection. This extension pack consists of a lot of interesting extensions. You can install them one by one too, but this one gives you the essential package containing everything you need for Angular development within Visual Studio Code. So I highly recommend to install Angular Essentials version 16. Again, I will give you a few minutes to catch up, to update Visual Studio Code, to install Angular Essentials, or whatever you want in order to successfully implement some Angular samples. Nice! So everybody has successfully installed VS Code and the latest version of Angular Essentials. Very good. By the way, if I didn't mention it already, of course we will do the exams, the written exams on your own computers. So we will not go in an IT room, in an EDV site, we will simply use your computers. That's maybe important for you, as you are not used to how I do it, so you can use your own devices. And it's your own responsibility to keep your devices up to date. That's important. So if you have problems with your own laptop during the exam, it's your problem. Okay, that's an important one. It's part of this education here that you keep your stuff in order. And your stuff in this case as a developer is your laptop, your computer, your development environment. Good, very good. So next I would like for you to create a new Angular app. And for the course of this course, we are going to create new Angular apps with these settings here. I highly recommend that you create on your computer a central folder where you put all the samples that we create in this course together. So create some root folder, call it, I don't know, course Mr. Stropek or whatever you want to call it, or programming or whatever. And inside of this root folder, I would recommend to gather all the samples, all the homework, so you have everything neatly packed together. Okay? And the first application that we are going to create is with these settings. First, we always enable routing. I hope you can remember what routing is from last year. If not, don't hesitate to ask. I highly recommend that you put the entire root folder of this course in your personal Git repository. So create a repository on GitHub. You can make it private, absolutely no problem. But don't check in every single sample in a separate repository. We will sometimes do that when we practice continuous integration and delivery, but for the most parts it's perfectly fine if you have all your samples in a single repository. Currently, we are not using tests, but definitely in the course of this year, we are going to take a look at tests. So this one is currently applicable, but maybe not in the future. This one is new, standalone, and we are going to talk about it today. Strict. I demand of you that you program in strict mode. Strict mode means that Angular and TypeScript enforce beautiful code. There are some rules that you cannot break when programming with strict. So strict ensures that you are following good practices for TypeScript coding and Angular coding. And strict doesn't allow you to cut corners. That's the important thing. And we want to learn how to write beautiful code here. The last one is optional. I'm going to use SCSS instead of CSS. Last year we always used CSS, but this year I'm going to switch to SCSS because it's more practically relevant. In practice, at least in my experience, everybody uses SCSS or a similar language on top of CSS. You will see it's not very complicated. We are not going to use it in its full glory. We just use some basic functionalities from it, but you should get used to it. And finally, of course, please specify the folder name and specify the project name. Now, for the first exercise, is about 7 segments display. Do you know what a 7 segments display is? Never seen? Okay. Let me quickly show you how this looks like. I will open the GitHub repo, which I will of course give you to. But I will give you the repo at the end of the lesson. Now, this is a 7 segment display. You see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 digit display. This is what we are going to build, and we are going to experiment this one. So I recommend that you call this folder something with 7 segments display or something like this and give the project a name. Okay? So your job, please create a new Angular app with these settings here. Again, 7 segments display or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, again, I will give you a few minutes in order to kick off this application because it will take a few moments until everything is restored. You can remember, node and npm install takes a while. Okay, you know what? We now created the app and we will start in the next hour inspecting the app and taking a look at the standalone components feature. I know that some of you are still waiting for npm install to finish, so let's now do the 5-minute break and afterwards we are going to look at the app. So see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back after the break. Everybody has installed the necessary dependencies with npm install. It happened automatically when we created the Angular app, and with that we should have the app and we should be able to go into the folder and open the folder with code dot in Visual Studio Code. This is our preferred development environment here in this course. Because we have these beautiful smart displays, I think I can leave the dark theme, or do you prefer me to use the light theme? What is easier to read? Okay like that? Should we pump up the font a little bit more, or is it okay like this? Okay? If it's hard for you to read, please let me know. Then I can always increase the font size. Good. So we now created an Angular app and we did that a lot of times in the last year. But this time things are a little bit different because if you remember what we just did, where is my browser? Here is my browser. We specified the standalone flag here. What does standalone mean? Standalone is a feature that we haven't taken a look at in the last year because it wasn't done. It was very, very experimental. But this year we should definitely go for it and use it. Can you remember last year when we created Angular apps, I told you a lot of things about the ng module. We created the ng module and we created a routing module and we had to import modules and export modules and modules there, modules here, modules everywhere. And those modules are now gone. Standalone component means that the whole idea of Angular modules is no longer relevant. So Angular becomes much simpler. No ng module anymore. The components are, as the name suggests, standalone. They just exist and can be used. Let me show you how this reflects in code. You can follow along if you want, or just watch what I'm going to show you. We are not typing code yet. We are just taking a look at the app. Now, as you can remember, the default application here in our Angular project lives in the source app folder. And here we still have our app component, HTML, CSS, and TypeScript. We'll take a look at that in a second. And previously we had this app module stuff. And you see the app module stuff is simply gone. It's not there anymore. Instead, we have this app routes TS. It's very, very simple. If you can't remember the Angular router anymore, please revisit the recordings of my sessions last year or read the documentation. This is essentially where you specify the routes. Then we additionally have this app.config, which is essentially an application configuration place where the routes are referenced. So the application config consists of the routes and many more things that we will talk later on. It's not a topic for today's lesson. But no modules, absolutely no modules. That's a simple value that is exported here. No modules. And last but not least, in main.ts, we don't need to change anything here. Here we are bootstrapping the application, tell it the name of the root component, that's app component, that's this thing here, and the config. This is where routes come from. So the app config is defined here, and the config TS here references the routes down here. So this is how the routes get into the bootstrapping process. And that's it. You don't need to change anything in these files. Well, yes, you have if you want to add new routes, but that's the only thing that you have to change. No ng modules anymore. Nothing at all. Now when we take a look at the app component here, we have this important field here, which is called standalone true. And this is what I want you to use in this course, because it's the more modern way of building Angular apps. Still, you will find a lot of existing apps out there who use modules. So it's good that you learned about modules, but over time, more and more Angular applications will live without modules. They will live with standalone components. Standalone components have a lot of advantages. Things are getting smaller, things are getting faster, you don't need to generate modules, you have to write less code. So it's really a very good thing that we now have these standalone components. So whatever you can remember about the modules last year, you can forget about it. Instead, use standalone. Good. Any questions? Not that difficult, right? Things are simply getting easier. That's always a good thing. Good, let's clean up the app component HTML. As you know, Angular generates a bunch of marketing blah blah at the beginning of the file. Please delete everything except the router outlet. The router outlet is important. I hope you can remember what the router outlet is. We are going to define routes, and the router outlet is where the routes are being injected. I will demonstrate that in a second. For now, simply remove all the marketing blah blah from HTML, and this SCSS is already empty. You can also take a look at the global styles. It's empty. So now we really have an empty solution, nearly empty. In the TypeScript file, there is this title here. You can also get rid of it. Now we have an empty application. Okay? So HTML file, remove everything except router outlet. SCSS, empty. TypeScript, empty class. Got it? Good? Awesome. Let's run the app. I hope you can remember how we start an Angular app. If not, I will tell you, npm start. Not that difficult. Yes, of course I share my precious data with Google. Okay, and open it in the browser, and we see an impressive empty app. It's empty because this is what we did. When you see a white screen in the exam or in the homework, you should immediately open the developer tools of the browser and check, make sure that we do not have any red squigglies or red messages here in the console. So please make that a habit of yours. When you have a problem or you are not sure whether the app does what it should do, in this case displaying an empty page, always verify that the console doesn't have any warnings or errors in it. Some of you made the mistake last year. You were sitting in front of your computer wondering why you don't see anything, and you simply forgot to take a look at the console because there you would have seen the error message. So don't forget that, okay? Always check the console. Always check the console. For us, this looks perfectly fine. We now have the Angular app running. I can keep it running in the background. It's fine like that. Good. Let's quickly refresh our memory about how the router outlet works and how routing works, just to make sure that you can remember everything, because we are going to need that one. I will use this plus sign here in order to open a second terminal directly here in Visual Studio Code. And in this terminal, as soon as it starts, hello terminal, please. Okay, try it again. Come on. For whatever reason, the terminal does not start. And now it's here. Whatever. My computer needed a second to think about the world. Whatever. We are going to create a new component just to make sure that we can remember our router outlet. Can you remember npx ng generate component whatever, let's say greeting. If you do that, you get a new subfolder which says greeting. Here you see that the new component is already standalone true. Let's create a second component, not greeting, but saying goodbye. See, now we have two folders, greeting and saying goodbye. npx ng generate component and then the name of the component. We did that in the last year. It's just to get into it again. I'm pretty sure that maybe some of you haven't done any Angular development for quite a few months now. So it's just a repetition, okay? If we check the greeting component HTML, let's say this is a header 1 hello world. And if we check the say goodbye HTML, we can say goodbye world, whatever. Now we have two components, greeting and saying goodbye. And the reason why I created that together with you is because now we can recap how routing works. The routing is done here in approutes.ts. So now we can, for instance, say, let's define the path. The path should be greeting, and the component should be the greeting component. And then we can say we want to have exactly the same thing, but this time I want to say saying goodbye. And guess what? The component will be the saying goodbye component. Can you remember? That is routing. You define the path under which certain components should be reachable. If you did everything correctly, and I will give you a moment to catch up in a second, you can now say greeting in your app, and you will hopefully see an error. Oh, I'm very sorry. I messed up. It must not start with a slash. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry, so please remove the slash at the beginning. See, now we have greeting, and if we say saying goodbye, we will see goodbye world. Everything red has disappeared from the console, and the URL now is capable of addressing our components. Okay? Last thing that I want you to remember, we covered that last year, it's just a refreshing. We can say path nothing, we can say redirect to greeting, see, redirect to greeting, path match full. If you can't remember the details, just trust me or rewatch the video from last year. This means if the user enters nothing as a path, we redirect the user to the greeting path. Path match, just trust me, edit for the empty route. So if I do that, press enter, we immediately automatically get to the greeting component. So that was the router, what the router was all about. Please try to catch up, try to follow along, and tell me if you have any problems. Very nice. Now, we do not need the greeting and the saying goodbye component. It was just for demonstration purposes. So please delete these folders. Delete the greeting folder, delete the saying goodbye folder, and simply remove all the routes again. And our app should again be very impressive. Empty. Yes, everything is empty, no errors. We are back to square one. This is exactly what we wanted. And this is one of the most important things here. We have standalone components. We can simply delete the folder. Last year, you always had to remember that you need to remove the folder and delete the component from the modules file, because there were modules. With standalone components, they are standalone. Delete the folder and poof, the component is gone. Hope you understand what I mean. Hope you can follow. Very, very nice. Now, please do not follow along. I will stop my Angular server here and I will take the prepared sample and show you what we want to build together. So this is an example. I don't know if I will do exactly that example together with you live in the exercise, but still I want to show you a goal. What kind of application do we want to build? Let me demonstrate that to you. Good. Now this is what I want to build together with you. See? If I zoom in a little bit, do you see the, oops, sorry. If I zoom in a little bit, do you see the 7-segment display here? Yep. Exactly. So if I change the number up there, it changes down here. And just for demonstration purposes and for getting into the whole signal topic, we are going to implement 2 different displays. The first one, this one, is a very, very simple display. It's not yet consisting of these 7 segments. It's regular numbers, nothing special here. But we are going to build this one consisting of 2 components. We are going to build one component, the first one. It will be the regular display number. So it displays an entire number. And then, let's take another color. This regular display number consists of an embedded component, which is called regular display digit. So a regular display number consists of multiple, in this case 4, regular display digits. Of course, we don't need that just to print something on the screen, but it's a very good starter exercise for going into the second one, because here we will also have the 7 segments display number, And again, we will have a component for the 7 segments display digit. Got it? So the first one is strictly speaking not necessary, but it will be a first step towards component separation and signals. And the second one will make this a little bit more interesting. Okay? We will then, later on, I think I called it, oh, how did I call it? I forgot how I called it. Give me a second. Routes, where are you? Cache register, okay. We are going to implement something like this. Here you see it, I make it a little bit smaller. On the left hand side you see a bunch of vegetables and fruits, and you can click on it and you will see you have a nice little receipt if you want, and at the top in a very simple way you see the current total, what you have to pay for all these fruits and vegetables. So this is what we are going to finally build. Okay, here you see again interesting thing, because we need some screen layout. I will tell you a little bit about CSS grids. You will love it. I hope you will love it. It's awesome. You see how we can reuse our Angular component, and you will again learn something about signals, but this time we don't have a basic data type like a number, but this time we have a collection. So I will show you how to deal with signals in the context of complex objects and arrays. Good. So now you have a goal in your mind. You have a vision where we are heading towards. Okay. So let's close this one and this one. I will put this on my second monitor. It will be my kind of guide for building that together with you. Yeah, and by the way, I will now mention that, of course, all my examples that I prepare are available to you. So the ready-made sample is already in this GitHub repository, and I will now take this one and put it into the HackMD workspace. So right at the beginning, I will add this link to you, to here. So for you, this is what I want to say. So now you have the link to the GitHub repository, but please don't open it immediately and just copy the code. That's not the point of this exercise. I want, together with you, develop the sample step by step so you really understand what's going on. But if you miss something, if you try to recap at home or something, you can always take a look at the GitHub repository. Okay? Good. So now you have this one. Nice, nice. Let's get started. Let's get started with the regular digit component. Can you remember we had this regular number, not the 7 segments already, regular number, and we consisted of a regular digit or 4 regular digits. So let's create 2 additional components. npx ng generate component. I will call it RegularDigit. You can call it any way you like, but I recommend following along, because then it's easier for you to take my code and write it just as I did. RegularDigit. Again, so to make it very, very clear what we do, we have a regular number, which would be something like this, and the regular digit would be a single digit. Okay? That is the component RegularDigit. And just in analogy to that, we are going to create a regular number. To make it very clear what this one is, if we have our number, the regular number is the entire thing here. Okay? This is the second component that I created here. Good. Last but not least, I want to have a component with which we can test the display. So I will call this one the number display test component. That's the last one. It will just display this nice little form where I can enter any number, and it should then be displayed with our components, okay? So we have these three components which are important for today's exercise. The regular digit, the regular number, and the number display test. I will give you a second to catch up and ask any questions that you might have. Very nice. So everybody's there. Let's start in a rather simple way. What I want to do first, together with you, is to put the regular number into our number display test. So please open the number display test component HTML. Put a nice little header on top, H1. Let's call it number display test. Nothing fancy here. And then we look at the regular number component, TypeScript file. Can you remember from last year? There was this magic selector here. The selector is the name of the component with which you can reference this component inside of other components. So it should be possible to just say, give me an app regular number by using a new HTML tag, app regular number. Let me show you how this works. We can simply say app regular number and close this one, and guess what? It doesn't work. It should work, shouldn't it? Again, this one here, selector. Did I do a typing mistake? No, I didn't do a typing mistake. So what might be the problem? Now this is the tiny teeny little drawback of standalone components. Do you have an idea? We have to import it exactly. Last year we had this notion of a module, and once we imported something into the module, it was available everywhere. This does no longer work with standalone components. With standalone components, every single component needs to explicitly specify what it needs to function. Every Angular component imports the common module, at least for the sake of this course. And here we can now say, give me the regular number component. So we make the regular number component available to be used within the number display test. So if we now take a look at the HTML, the error is gone. Now it works. And if we take a look at the browser window and open up the localhost 4200, it's still empty. Why? Where is my greeting? What did I do wrong? Of course I made a mistake. Which one? Yep. Exactly, thank you, no routes. You didn't forget everything over summer holiday. I like that. So let's go into app routes and specify a route. We can put it in the root route, so say path, nothing, component is the number display test component, and path match is full. And once you did that, woohoo, we see something, no error, perfectly fine. I give you a second to catch up. Okay, welcome back after the break. Before the break, we had to solve a tricky problem in one of your student projects. I will quickly show you what the problem was and show you the results, and that might help you when you have this problem maybe sometimes in the future. What the student in question did is he took this app regular number and by accident put this regular number reference inside of the same component. So the component is referencing itself. And the result will be a white page and a very, very interesting error message. Maximum calls stack size exceeded. It's kind of obvious because we are referencing the component in itself, so it is an endless recursion. But the problem is, we simply didn't see it for a bunch of minutes. So therefore, if you have this problem, sometimes in your Angular career, check if you are using the same component inside of its own template, then this error happens. If you remove that one, the error is gone and the application works again. Okay? So we had to fix that one, and luckily we found it after a few minutes. Nice. Next step. We now have our regular number here. And the regular number, if we take a look at this regular number HTML here, this regular number should now consist of multiple regular digits. So we can exercise again, we can try it again to reference one component inside of the other component. So if we take a look, the regular digit component has a selector which is called app regular digit. So let's take this app regular digit and put it in the app regular number and put everything in a div. This one. And we are going to have 4 of them because we want to implement a 4-digit display. Got it? Now I have the problem that app regular digit is not a known HTML tag. How do I solve that? You have to know that immediately. One word, import, exactly. So we have to go to the regular number component, and this again results from the fact that we have standalone components. That's the point. That's why we are practicing it. We need to remember that in order to make regular digit component available to regular number component, we have to import it. Regular digit component. And if we do that, error suddenly goes away, and this is how it looks. Regular digit works. Nice. Well, of course, the regular digit will not consist of a regular digit works or something like this, but it will also consist of just a digit, as the name suggests. So let's put a div here and just use a single digit for demonstration purposes. I will use the 8, but you can essentially use whatever you want, and the result should be something like this: 88888. Do you happen to know what we have to do in order to not display the 8s one below each other, but one beside each other? Anybody? CSS professionals here in the room? Display inline. Let me show you how this is done. We go to regular display as CSS. We specify that we want to format the div. Why do I specify that? Well, because I'm using a div here. So this div formats this div here. Okay? And we simply say display inline, because by default the div is displayed as a block with an automatic move to the next line. But if we display it inline, it's like a character. And if you say this display inline, you see we now have 8 8s one beside each other. Yes, question. We could use a span too. That's perfectly fine. The behavior of the span is automatically inline. So what you essentially suggest is that you say in the HTML, you would change that to a span, something like this. And inside, we could remove that one, and that will lead to exactly the same output. But then I couldn't show you what display inline means. But you're right, absolutely. Do you want to keep it like this? We can keep it like that. It's fine. It's a good suggestion. Thank you very much. Good. Nice. Now the problem is that, of course, the regular digit shouldn't be a constant. What's the meaning of a component that always displays the same number? So we need to make this one flexible. You have a question? No? The answer. You know how this is done? Yeah. How? With what? Yeah, that's true. That with the double mustache syntax. So what we can essentially do is we can go to the regular digit component here, and here, as we learned it, specify, for instance, the, let's call it underscore digit. Why underscore? You will see that later on. Let's make it an 8 or a 7 so that we see a difference. And then you said use the double mustache syntax, this one, and use the digit here, right? Good. And if we do that, we see quadruple 7. 7, 7, 7, 7. 7. No? Works fine. Good for me. However, you need to understand that the regular digit works closely together with the regular number. Remember what we had. We had a number, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, sorry, 4. We just said 4, 1. This is the number, and again, this is the digit. So somehow the regular number needs to be able to control the digit from outside. You understand what I mean? The digit doesn't know what to display. It needs some kind of input parameter. Now, how can we do that? Angular supports, for this purposes, a special decorator which is called @input. @input. This decorator can be applied to either a value, something like underscore digit, or a property setter. Let's call it property setter with a value that will be a number. So essentially what we say is that this component, the regular digit component, can receive a parameter called digit as its input parameter. And guess what? If the input changes, we simply say this dot underscore digit equals value. We simply change our internal state. Got it? If we have this, we can then go to the regular number component and magically use data binding for the digit, and for instance say this one is 1, and maybe if we change that one to digit equals to 2, something like this, and 3 and 4, what we will end up having is 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow! This is the magic of inputs. Let me show you that again. By specifying here this @input, we get here an input parameter in the template through which we can set the value from outside using data binding. So we bind a value from the number component to a value on the digit component. Is that clear? Clear so far? Yep. Awesome. Very, very nice. Now, those of you who know a little bit more about Angular, maybe because of an internship or something like this, in your head you might say, oh, Mr. Stropik is making this so complicated. Why can't we simply put this @input in front of this property and we don't need a setter and so on? I know this would be possible, but I want to make 2 or 3 steps more, and for that we are going to need this one. Okay, so bear with me. It makes sense. Okay, I'm having a plan. I hope it will work out nicely. Are we good? Very good. The next step is signals. Now we are reaching this part of the course where we no longer talk mainly about standalone components, but now we introduce signals. Now, what is a signal? Let's quickly revisit from last year how default Angular data binding works. Can you remember what we did? We simply said square brackets and then used values like that to bind, just as you see it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? just that you see it here. See? You simply say this value is bound to this value down here. How does this work? Can you remember I told you last year? I mean, how does Angular recognize if this underscore digit changes? Imagine that you read it from the server. How does Angular know about that the web request is done and the value has changed because the server delivered a new value? Or maybe you have a set timeout where you wait for 2 seconds and then you increment the value. How does Angular recognize that there is a timeout in your application and that it needs to re-evaluate the data bindings? How's that done? Can you remember? There is a very famous library which is called Zone.js. Zone.js is a library that patches all browser events like key is pressed, mouse is moved, web request is done, timeout is over. Zone.js hooks into the browser's inner workings and informs, in this case, Angular about any event that's going on. Hey, the user is using the mouse. Hey, the user is pressing a key. Hey, a web request is done. Hey, a WebSocket message appeared. Hey, a timeout is done. Whenever such an event happens, Zone.js is informing Angular that something meaningful happened. And you know what Angular does? Angular revisits all the different data bindings and asks the data bindings, hey, what's your new value? Then it compares the old value with the new value, and if they don't match, it updates the UI. Of course, Angular is pretty smart in doing that. It's not, let's say, stupidly doing a lot of unnecessary stuff. It tries to reduce the number of data binding refreshes to the absolute minimum, but at the end of the day, it's still a lot. It's not very efficient. It's comfortable. Developer productivity is high. Everything is happening a little bit of fairy dust, Harry Potter, magically, just it works, but it isn't fast. It would be much, much, much faster if we would not need this Zone.js. It would be much faster if the digit itself could actively inform Angular, I changed. You know what I mean? If every value that you bind to would actively inform the user interface framework, I changed, you have to do something. It would even be better if the value is calculated, that the value is cached. So it doesn't need to calculate it in every single data binding stuff. It would, in an ideal world, the calculated value would be cached and the cached value would be used as long as possible to reduce the number of calculation steps that the application has to do. Because what we want at the end of the day, we want to have data binding to be very, very fast. And guess what? Signals are exactly delivering that. Signals are essentially wrappers around the value that inform the host of the signal about any change. So if you put a value in a signal and you change the value of the signal will automatically go to Angular and say, I changed. Theoretically, we would not need Zone.js anymore once we have signal. But this has not been implemented in Angular 16. In the future, you will be able to opt out of Zone.js, and that will make your Angular application significantly smaller and more efficient. That's where we want to go to. Have you ever heard about frameworks like Svelte, for instance? Anybody? Yeah, I see a few nodding heads. Svelte is an awesome framework. And these frameworks, they are giving Angular a hard time because they are much smarter in terms of data binding. And with signals, Angular is catching up. Angular is modern again. Many people said that the older versions of Angular, 15, 14, 13, 12, they were a little bit outdated. And I personally also had not a good gut feeling. I was looking at other frameworks like Svelte and so on and thought, maybe I have to learn a new framework. But now, with Angular 16 and Signals, the world of Angular developers got much better. It's a developer preview. but with Angular 17, 18, the versions that will come in the upcoming months, Angular will be sexy again. Yeah, that's the point. Angular will become better again. Okay? So let's do exactly that. Let's turn this digit into a signal. And that is not complicated. You simply wrap a signal around the value. Signal. No. This is what I want to have. Whoops. See? Now we have a value, but this value is now a signal. It will automatically inform Angular whenever I change it. Let me quickly add one thing that will be important in the upcoming months once we switch to WPF and XAML and so on. We are going to do, or Avalonia, we will see what we are going to use. We will definitely take a look at desktop development with C# because that is part of our curriculum. In C#, there is a dedicated interface for that. It's called iNotifyPropertyChanged. Every class that is capable of informing its host, hey, I changed, has to implement iNotifyPropertyChanged. And conceptually, this is very similar to signals. So in C#, we will talk a lot about iNotifyPropertyChanged. You will implement it yourself, and you will use components that already come with a ready-made implementation of iNotifyPropertyChanged. In Angular, this is what Signal is all about. Now we get an error down here because we can no longer just assign the value. Well, that can be easily fixed because there is a method which is called set, and you simply change the value like that. If you want to change a signal, just call the set method. Let's see if it works. Oh my god, no, that's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's something very strange. Now what's the problem? The problem is this one. You cannot read a signal like this. If you want to read a signal, you have to call it. See? Just add the parentheses. And if you take a look at that one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is what we changed. We wrapped the signal around the number. If we want to write its value, we are going to set the value. If we want to read its value, we are going to use the parentheses in order to call it. And that's all we have to do to make our app more efficient. Because now Angular is super smart. It recognizes that this is a signal. So it doesn't need to constantly check over and over again, hey _digit, did you change? Did you change? By the way, did you change? A timeout is over. Did you change? User pressed the key. Did you change? That's no longer necessary. Angular can now relax, sit back, and rely on the fact that _digit will tell Angular when it has changed. And that reduces the amount of calculations you have to do for updating the UI significantly, makes your app more efficient. That's what Signal is all about. Got it? And that's brand new. Now that's only available for a few months. Good. Are we good so far? I think we are, right? Nice. Now let's format that a little bit more beautiful. Okay? Let's do a little bit CSS, at least some basics. We will not make it super beautiful. You know, I'm not a designer, not at all. But I want to give you a little bit more information about how you can do certain things in CSS. Now we are working here in the RegularDigit component, and please open the SCSS of the RegularDigit component. The first thing that I would like to do here is I would like to change the font family to a non-proportional font. Non-proportional font means that every letter, every digit has the same width. Korean U. You're familiar with Korean U? Compared to Times New Roman, where an L is smaller than a W. Okay? Good. Let's change that. So let's change the span here and use the font family And in this case, we can say Korean U, Korean monospace. And if we use that one, you see here we have Korean U, Korean monospace. That's good. Let's change the font size. Pump it up to, I don't know, 85 pixel or something like this. Yep, that is good. Change the color, red, or whatever color you like. Nice, looks good. Okay, now that's basic, that's baby stuff. Okay, we all know that. That's nothing new for us. However, I have a question to you. Imagine that you want to sell this RegularDigit component to the world. Everybody will need this RegularDigit component. However, not everybody likes to have it in this font. Not everybody likes to have it in this size. And not everybody wants to have it in this color. How can we make this configurable? Now, the easiest way to make this configurable is to change the global styles here. Here, we are in the global styles. And what you typically do if you have components where somebody else should be able to restyle it, what we are going to use is we are going to use CSS variables. I think they are called CSS component. I always call them CSS variables, but they are called something different. CSS variables. They are called custom properties. CSS custom properties. Variables is just the alternative name. So what we can do is we can go to our global styles.css. Please note that the global styles CSS is in the root folder of your app source directory. And there we do the following. We say :root. That means we define something in the root namespace, in the root space of the CSS stuff. And here we say -- for instance, RD color, RD for RegularDigit, and there we say red. Now this is how you declare and assign a value to a CSS variable. Strange syntax, right? Well, it is like it is. I'm just the messenger. Now we can go to this one and you can replace this one here where we use the variable with var -- and now you should even get IntelliSense in Visual Studio Code. That's awesome. See? This is how you read a CSS variable. And it still works. Let me show it to you. Here it's still red. That's beautiful because you, as the component vendor, you ship that one. And the one who uses your component can simply change the color scheme by changing or setting these variable values. Got it? There are more possibilities for adjusting or making the visual appearance of your components configurable, but this is one that is definitely used pretty often. Let's do the same with the font family just to make it complete. RD font family. Here we have the Korean U, Korean monospace, and let's say the RD font size. Exactly. And what did I have? 85 pixels? I can't remember. Yeah, 85 pixels. So we simply set these variables, and inside of the component we can now exchange that with the variables. -- RD font size. Here it is. And last but not least, the variable RD font family. And if you made it correctly, it should still display everything fine. Let me demonstrate it here. So this is how you declare and assign values to CSS variables. This is how you use the CSS variables. So now we have a component that we can easily share between Angular apps, and they are still configurable in terms of usability, in terms of appearance. Please try that. Let me know if you have any problems. Awesome. So we already have a nice component where we have some styling, where we have some Data binding, I think with that we are pretty much done. In the future, hopefully in the next Angular version, this code will no longer be necessary. In an ideal world, we would simply be able to write something like @input directly here in front of a signal. But this is currently not supported. Maybe an alternative syntax would be to use an input instead of a signal here. This is in fact part of the specification of signals in Angular. So it shouldn't be necessary to have this code. It should be made simpler. But the Angular team simply hasn't finished working on that yet. So it will be simplified. Currently, we have to manually transfer the value from the input into the signal. But in the future, this will no longer be necessary. Your code will even be simpler. Hopefully, this will come with Angular 17, and hopefully you will be able to use that in your final exam. So then your life becomes even easier. Okay, I will let you know. Good. So now we have the RegularDigit component. Check. Now let's talk about the RegularNumber component. Let's first focus on the code. Now, just like before, we have to store the internal state, which is now not a single digit but a whole number, in a variable. So let's call this one _number equals to, and now you're already professionals in using signals. Let's say the default value is 0. Sounds good. And you are also professionals in terms of inputs. So we simply say input, something like this, set number, exactly like that, and use the set method. So please define the signal, define the input setter, and transfer the value from the input setter into the signal. Beautiful. So now let's think about how we can extract the different digits from the number. How can we do that with signals? Now what we could do, please do not follow along, this is wrong, we are not going to do it like that. We could say we have the first digit, 0, we have the second digit, which is also 0 by default, the third one is, and the fourth one. Come on, fourth, exactly. And then we could do some magic here. We could, for instance, say whenever the input changes, something like this, we would like to say the first value is, that's the wrong one, this dot first equals the value modulo 10. You understand what I mean? That's the most right digit of the number. Now the next one, this dot second, exactly, we divide it by 10 and then take the modulo of 10. And the third will be this one, and the fourth will be this one. Of course we could do that, but that's not the way you should do it with signals. That's not the signal way of doing it. So please get rid of that and get rid of that. I hope you didn't follow along. Signal is much cooler. Let me show you how this works. First, and now we have another cute little helper, which is called computed. Computed. It's part of signals. And the first one is now computed by taking this dot underscore number and calculating it by modulo 10. Please note that we are reading the signal here. See, we are reading the signal, so don't forget the parentheses here. And computed is a thing of beauty in terms of signals, because this computed thing is super smart. It automatically knows that it depends on the number. And it executes this calculation only, listen closely, only if the number changes. Otherwise, it will not do the calculation at all. And once the calculation is done, it will automatically cache the value. So whenever Angular happens to need the value, it will not recalculate the value. It will simply take the latest cached value, the latest cached result. And the cache result is all automatically changed if the number changes. So what we essentially get is we get a hierarchy of computed values that depend on each other. And at the very bottom, maybe you have some signals. From these signals, we calculate this value. And from this value, we calculate this value. And from this value, we calculate this value. And all the dependencies are monitored automatically. And we have caches on all levels. And you do not need to do anything for it. You get it for free. Get the idea? That's the idea of doing something inside of this computed method here. Well, then we can easily define the second one. We can easily define the third one. We can easily define the fourth one. GitHub Copilot is magically inserting the necessary code here. If you have GitHub Copilot installed, it will probably make you the suggestion. If not, you have to type it. I will give you a second to catch up. Okay, so everybody has written down this code. Of course, we do not need to put the entire computation logic inside of this lambda function. Because if you take a look at this code, you will see that this code is three times pretty much the same, well, nearly identical. The only thing is here that we have a different power. So power of 10. 10 to the power of 1, 10 to the power of 2, 10 to the power of 3. Okay? So we can maybe create a small little helper function just to show you that you can, without any problems, use functions in computed here. You can say private get digit, let's say index number, and it will return a number. And then we simply take this logic here and put it here in this method, and instead of dividing by 10, we can say divide by math.pow power 10 to the power of index. Understand what I mean? And with that, we can easily say here get digit 1, 10 to the power of 1. And the next one will be get digit 2. And the next one will be get digit 3. I think you got the idea, right? This should demonstrate that, of course, you can structure your program as you are used to. You can create methods and call these methods inside of the computed lambda. No problem. Good. Nice. Now that we have first, second, third, and fourth, we can easily go back to the HTML and change the data binding of the digits here. Very simple. This will be our fourth. This will be our third. This will be our second. And this will be our first. Got the idea? Let me put them side by side so you see it clearly. These are the data bindings. These are the computations. Well, the naming is maybe a little bit strange. If you have a number 1, 2, 3, 4, then this one will be the first, and this one will be the fourth. Okay, so we are using from the right to the left. This is why I first use the fourth, then third, then the second, then the first. Good? Clear? Let's try it. Let's go to our number display test component here, and let's specify the number here, and let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, for instance. And if you check it, it should say 1, 2, 3, 4. If you change something, 4, 3, 2, 1, it should now say 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you just set it to 1, it should say 0, 0, 0, 1. So it works. Congratulations, You just mastered signals. Well, mastered. You entered the world of signals. Yes, you have a question. We can make it a little bit more beautiful if you want. It's not a must. I don't want to have the 0 in case the value is smaller than 1000. So what we could, of course, do is we could add a little bit more logic here. We could say if this dot underscore number divided by math.pow 10 to the power of index, something like this. If this is lower than 1, we could say return, what do we return? I don't know, let's return -1, for instance. Exactly. And return the rest in any other case. So now we set the digit to -1 if the digit should not be displayed. So we can go to the RegularDigit component HTML and add a little bit of business logic. I just want to show you that the things that you're used to in Angular data binding still work with signal. So we can easily say if the digit equals -1, then space otherwise underscore digit, something like this. This works perfectly fine, and then you simply get a 1. See? What is the problem? The 1 is on the left-hand side. Where are my spaces gone? Where are the HTML experts? See? 1 is not where it should be. We don't have leading spaces anymore. Non-breaking spaces, anybody? Are you familiar with NBSP? Non-breaking spaces are spaces that must not be removed by the browser. Otherwise, if you use a lot of spaces, the browser will ignore them. But the NBSP, non-breaking space, will result in spaces. You see the spaces here? NBSPs are spaces in HTML that must not be removed by the browser. Yeah. So you see, this is how you can make it more interesting. And again, Angular is super smart. This whole business logic is only executed if digit changes, and that's important. That is what this sample should demonstrate. Very nice. Do you have any questions so far regarding signals, standalone, or anything like that? Because otherwise we are going to start with the 7 segments display, and there, of course, we are going to continue to practice signals. So, let's talk about the 7 segments display. Let me quickly open up the GitHub repository and remind you what a 7 segments display is. This is a 7 segments display. Now, I have looked up an SVG file for a 7 segments display. It's part of the GitHub repository. You do not need to, well, yes, you should open it up. So please go to the GitHub repository. Remember how you find it? HackMD, link at the very top. There you go to the folder. And if you scroll down a little bit, you will find this paragraph here. And this is the link. Let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with SVG, short for Scalable Vector Graphics? Who is not familiar with SVG? Oh, quite a few of you. Okay, very good. So, let me tell you something which will probably blow your mind. No, it will not blow your mind, but it will be hopefully kind of interesting. Did you know that HTML has a graphics engine, a vector graphics engine built in? That's SVG. So whenever you define HTML with text, you can always add graphics too. Think of a business chart, the bar chart, the line chart, something like this. Think of a company logo, for instance. It's always SVG. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics and can be simply made part of the HTML page. Let's quickly look up an example. Here I now opened up the Angular website. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see that the Angular logo at the very left top corner is an image tag. You see it here. It's an image tag. And this references an SVG file. Now if I take a look at this SVG file, let's open it up here, you will see that this SVG file, if we take a look at the source, is nothing else than XML, just like HTML. And the beautiful thing is that this SVG does not need to reside in a separate file. The Angular developers could have added the content of the SVG file exactly here instead of this image. So you can mix graphical information and text information in a single page. That's what SVG is all about. Scalable vector graphics. This stuff is awesome. It's so powerful. You can do such crazy stuff with SVG. It supports animations. It supports a lot of stuff. Are you familiar with the graphical design tool called Inkscape? Some of you nod, some of you shake their heads. If you haven't taken a look at Inkscape, you missed something. Inkscape is the open source alternative to vector drawing programs from Adobe. Like GIMP is for pixel graphics, Inkscape is for vector graphics. And guess what the native file format of Inkscape is? SVG. Inkscape is awesome. I do all my graphical work when it comes to 2D vector graphics with Inkscape. So Inkscape is really good. And let me say that, and then we'll go into the break. This is the SVG code for the 7 segments display. What I did, well, to be honest, I copied this coordinates. What I did is I took down the I took these coordinates here, and they are simply polygons where you specify, okay, let's draw a line from here to here, 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 from here to here, from here to here, and that would be the A part. They are labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can look that up, I think, in the Wikipedia article. Let me quickly show you that. If I go to Wikipedia, 7 segment display, if we take a look at this article, we will, yeah, exactly. Here you see how they are called. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is how 7 segment displays are called, okay? And this is why I used A, B, C, D, E, F, G here. And you see, the stroke is this gray area here that separates the different segments. The fill is red, and the stroke width is the thickness, not the thickness, the thickness of the separation. So if you say, for instance, 0.5, the distance, come up, yeah, the different segments are separated by a thicker line. This is what you can do here. So design it as you like. So this is exactly what I want to put into our Angular app. And think about what this allows you. You can simply build any kind of business graphics in Angular with data binding just as you like. Dynamic graphics including data binding. That opens a whole new world. Good? Nice. Let's do a 5-minute break, and then we'll do exactly that. Welcome back from the break. Let's add the 7 segment digit and the 7 segment number by adding the SVG that we discussed a few minutes ago. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and now we have the regular digit and the regular number, and now we are going to add new components to it. npx ng generate component, and in the same pattern we are going to create 7 segment digit. And of course, also 7-segment number. Just the same pattern as before. We had the regular digit and the regular number, and now we have the 7-segment digit and the 7-segment number. Now that I say it, it would have been better to call it 7 segments plural digit because it exists of multiple segments. I'm sorry. Yeah. You can change it if you want. I will keep it that way. Good. And then we do exactly the same dance as before. In the number display test, we are a little bit late, no problem. What we did is we just created 2 additional components. The first one is called 7-segment digit, and the second is called 7-segment number. So please, those who just arrived, generate these 2 components. npx-ng generate component 7-segment digit, and npx generate component 7-segment number. And now let's do the same dance as before. Let's go to the number display test, and right below the app regular number, we are now going to use the app 7. Oh my god, I don't get IntelliSense. What did I do wrong? I'm confused. Help me. No import. Thank you. Exactly. So, we are going to use the 7-segment number component, and now we should get IntelliSense. App 7-segment number. Perfect. Let's go into the 7-segment number. In the 7-segment number here, we need 7-segment digit, right? Well, not perfectly right, but for the moment, okay. So let's add, I don't know, a div. And inside of the div, we add the app 7-segment digit. It's not available. Now I'm not asking again, import. Okay, don't forget the import. 7-segment digit component. And guess what? We need 4 of them. Good. Does anybody need more time? Could you follow along? Perfect. If we take a look at the app, where is my browser? Where is my browser? Did I close my browser? No, I didn't. Here it is. And you see, this is the one, and then we have 4 times 7-segment digit works. Awesome. Now let's simply take the SVG code that you can copy from me. Simply take this code and put this code in the 7-segment digit HTML. And then let's take a look at the app. Oh my god, we already have 7 segments. Isn't SVG awesome? You simply put the SVG in there and it just works. It's maybe a little bit too large. We could reduce the size. And of course, we can change the styling. We will do that in a second. But I think you got the point so far. Good, all problems solved. Now, let's do some styling to make it a little bit more beautiful. For that, we go into the SCSS file of the 7-segment digit component. And here we can, just as usual, style the polygon. Isn't that awesome? You can apply CSS styling to graphics, not just to text. Polygon. Here in this polygon, we can say we want to have a stroke with, what do we want to have? Maybe a light gray, EEE. Or if you want to have the long form, EE, EE, EE. That would be a light gray. If you want to have something a little bit more darker, just click here and choose the color that you prefer. That's the line that separates the segments from each other. And then we do a stroke width, and I will say 0.25 pixels. Let's see how this looks already pretty nice. Is it? Yeah, you can see it here. You can see it that we have a light gray separation of the different digits. This is what I wanted to have. Now we want to change the filling of these things. We can easily say fill it with red, and then we have red digits. Please choose a color that you like, okay? You know what? I would like to make this configurable again. Can you remember what we had before? Just a repetition. If I want to share this with other people, and those people who use the 7-segment digit component, they should be able to change the fill color. How do I do that? Yes? Exactly, a custom property or a variable. So we go back to the global styles here, and we can define, for instance, here a variable. Let's call it SSD for 7 segments display, separator stroke. That would be the color. Let's make it red by default. Then define an SSD width, separator width. Let's make it 1.25 pixels. That's good. And no, the stroke is wrong. The stroke was the light gray. Yeah. And the fill, that was what I meant. SSD, let's call it segment fill. That will be red. So now we have 3 additional CSS variables, also known as custom properties. And then we can change these values here to a reference to the variable. Just to refresh your memory, var -- SSD, and the first one is the stroke here. The second one is var -- SSD separator width, and the last one var SSD segment fill. And if everything works correctly, we should still see something in red. And just to make sure that it works, let's change this one to orange, for instance, and then we have orange digits. This is exactly what we want. I will go back to red, but you can use whatever you want. I give you a second to catch up and set the CSS variables. Okay. Now we need to come up with a strategy for how to enable the correct segments. Because currently we always display an 8, because all segments are active. But we want to activate only those segments which are relevant. So that means, I think it's in the Wikipedia article, so I don't need to draw. Exactly, this is the image that I was looking for. Yep. This is just one. So let's zoom in here. This is what I was looking for. Zoom in. See, for the 0, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, activated. For the 1, we only have B and C activated, and so on and so on. So now let's have a quick discussion how we could implement that. I will stop the recording or pause the recording here so we can have the discussion without any recording, and then I will show you how I would implement it. So you came up in the discussion with a pretty good solution, and I will now show you how we can do that, okay? So please open the 7-segment display digit components. I'm sorry. Didn't put my phone to mute. Now, phone is muted. Good. In the 7-segment digit component, we can essentially copy what we had in the regular digit component, because we will need the signal of the digit and we will need the input. So simply copy this one. Of course, in real life, you would not copy code. You would create a base class or something like this, but we are here in a sample context, so it's perfectly fine to copy this code. So take the code from the regular digit component and copy it into the 7-segment digit component, because this part is exactly identical. Okay, we need some imports. We need an import for signal, and we need an import for input to get rid of the syntax errors here. And now we do exactly what you suggested. We simply create 7 booleans, but signals of booleans, where we simply check whether we need to activate the segment A, B, C, D, E, F, and or G. How can we do that? Very simple. A equals to, can you remember, computed. Computed. And here we find out for which number we need to activate A. And this would be kind of boring to type it in, so I will give you this code via Discord. Okay? So please take a look at your Discord server. I just copied in the code, and I will also copy in this code for my code here, because it's kind of boring to type that in. So here we see that A segment should be active for the numbers 0, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The segment B should be active for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9. By the way, these are the applications where I am so grateful for AIs. It would be so boring to put that together on your own. It was not necessary at all. If you have GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT, they can simply generate this code for you. That is exactly what AIs were made for. Got it? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Nice. You understand this code, right? You take an array, you check whether the digit is included in this array, and then you know whether it's active or not. You suggested a map. I took separate properties. It's essentially the same, right? Good. Very good. The important thing here is the using of signals. That's the important thing. Now, let's make this one work. So for that, we go into the HTML here. And in the HTML, we need, as you suggested, conditionally change the filling color. This is what I wanted to say. Now for that, we can go into the SVG, sorry, in the CSS, and define a dedicated class for that. And here we can, for the first time today, use the beauty of SCSS, because normally you would have to write polygon. Please do not follow along. Polygon dot filled, sorry, filled, and then define something. But with SCSS, we have nesting. So what we can do is we can move that up, and now you can follow along and simply say ampersand means and. That means, hey, SCSS, if we are inside a polygon and the class is filled, then we want to do something. Fill, We have it up here. We can move it down. If it's filled, we want to fill it with a defined segment. And if it is not filled, this is how you write it in CSS, we say fill none. Isn't CSS amazing? And SCSS is even more amazing by being able to nest different styles, and that saves you from writing quite a bit of extra lines of code that you essentially don't need. So now we have a polygon that is filled or not filled. If we take a look at the current output, where is our app? Here is our app. It's currently black. Okay, so that's not what we have. What we want to do is we want to change here conditionally the class. And we do it like that. We simply say bind the class filled to A, and now we have to manually change that to B and C and D and E and F and G. Let's take a look. Everything's black. Okay, why is everything black? Because we didn't set the input. Ah, of course, of course. But it will hopefully work at the end. So let me show you the SCSS and let me show you the HTML code. So you see, these are the two styles which are important. And with this binding, we essentially say, if A is true, then assign the filled class. If A is not true, do not assign the filled class. If we do not assign the filled class, this should become active. I'll give you a second to catch up. I'm sorry, I just recognized that I made a mistake. It is important in this case to not have a space here between the ampersand and the colon. So this is a mistake. I just recognized that. I'm sorry. CSS is sometimes a little picky when it comes to syntax, and this is one of the cases. So please delete this space character here, and then we already see this one. Does anybody need more time? Good. So let's try to finish everything, to wire up everything together, because now we have the 7-segment digit here, and we can go to the 7-segment number, which has the 4 digits, exactly that we had it before. Here it is. And now we can add the data binding. And guess what? For that we need to implement the 7-segment number component, and that is exactly the same as the regular number. So what I ask you to do is to copy the code from the regular number component. We can use exactly the same code. As I said before, this was just a preparing exercise before. So in real life you wouldn't copy code, but for our example it's fine, because the regular number component was just a preparation to the final goal that we had. So it's fine to copy the code into the 7-segment number. Of course we need to add the necessary imports. Input needs to be imported, signal needs to be imported, computed needs to be imported. And once we have that, we can go here and define our bindings. That is, digit equals to, and the first one would be 4th, the second one would be 3rd, The third one would be second. And the last one would be first. So the API of our component 7-segment number looks exactly as the API of the regular number component. That's by design. I wanted to lead you step by step to this 7-segment display. Last but not least, and then we'll take some time to make sure that everybody has the correct code. I go to the number display test, and now I can add the number that I want. Number, and here, for instance, I specify I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's see what's going to happen. We see 1, 2, 3, 4. It's black. I don't know why it's black. I will check that immediately. But in general, the code works. So why it's black? Let me quickly analyze. Let's quickly check the regular number component. No, sorry. Probably. Yes, thank you very much. I only fixed it once and I didn't fix it the second time. Thank you for pointing that out, and that looks beautiful. Try some other values, maybe, I don't know, 9876. Looks good. What about just a 1? Looks good. What about maybe 2 digits, 19? Also looks pretty nice. So the code works perfectly fine. And the important thing that was the core element of this exercise is again and again and again the use of signals. Here we use the signal, here we use the computed, here we set the signal, and here we get the signal. Okay? So let's have a quick pause and make sure that everybody has a working version of this code. I like that all of you managed to follow along and you now have working versions of this code. As a kind of closing for today's series of lessons, I would like to enhance the number display test a little bit. So if we take a look at the app now, here is the app. I want to have an input field at the top where I can type in a number, and the number is automatically bound to both subcomponents. See? Okay. And for that, of course, I will teach you something new. In the past, we had this banana in a box binding. Can you remember? Can you remember what a banana in a box binding is? It was the box, and inside the box we had the bananas. And inside of the bananas we had ng modal. Can you remember? Exactly. We are not going to do that anymore. Yeah, that's for beginners. That's for babies. Now we are professionals, right? I mean, you're now in the final class of this school. Your last year, we have to celebrate it by doing everything in a more difficult way. No, in a more efficient way. No, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. What we are going to do today is we are going to dive much deeper. Well, not super much deeper, but a little bit deeper. Please open the number display test component and add one additional property here. And this property will be a number input, and it should be a new form control. This should be the form control, and the default value is 0. A new form control. You have to understand that in Angular, every input control, like for instance an input number, input text, all other controls that you have, they are always backed automatically by a form control. The form control holds the value of the control. It allows you to ask it whether the input is correct. Imagine that you have a maximum value of 5,000 and the user entered 5,100. Then you have a mistake. So all these validation things are going on inside the form control. Now, if you use so-called template-driven forms, as we did in the last year, you don't really see the form controls. They are hidden from you. They are simplified. You don't see them. But this year, I want to show you what they are capable of. We can manually create a form control. And the form control is the thing that binds the HTML input to the Angular logic behind these inputs. And we can manually bind them together, and then we have much more control, and we can write more efficient applications. And this is what I would like to demonstrate to you. So this is the form control, and now we can go into the HTML file and use exactly that form control. That works as follows. Let's create a simple form, very, very simple form. Let's create a label here. The label should be number to display or something like this, just a label. And then we put in the input type equals number. And now the GitHub Copilot thinks that I want to use a banana in a box binding, but we are smarter. We are no longer beginners. So we can now directly bind to the form control number input. Number input. Now this doesn't work. Why? Because we are missing an import statement. Go back a few months when we did template-driven forms and when we still had modules. I always told you that you have to import a certain module in order to be able to use ng module. Can you remember the name? The name was forms module. Now, if you want to build professional forms, no, the other one is also professional, but if you want to build the cool forms, let's put it that way, you don't use the template-driven forms with the forms module, but you are using the reactive forms module. And this is what you need to import. You definitely have to remember that. I will ask you that over and over and over and over and over again in the upcoming months. Okay? The reactive forms module is what enables the direct use of form control. See? Now the error is gone. And now we can directly bind this one to this one using a so-called subscription. Looks like that. We simply say number input dot value changes. This is a kind of message that is sent whenever the input changes. This is why it's called value changes. It's happening asynchronously, and if the user deleted everything in the field, the value would be null, and in this case we say 0. This here just says if the field doesn't contain any value, null, replace it with 0. And this here, this async, is not our core topic today. I simply want you to trust me with that. It's an async programming concept, and behind the scenes we have an RxJS subscription going on. You will learn more about that in the upcoming weeks. And we can use exactly the same data binding mechanism here in the second number, and that's it. We don't need anything more. Let me quickly check whether I screwed up. Okay, 0. If I change that one to 1, 2, 3, oh my god, it works so nicely. See? I can use that one, I can use that one, oh my god. Very, very nice. It works as expected. Please try to follow along. The important things are the binding to the form control, and then here, the binding to the value changes observable. Internally it's called a value changes, it's called an observable. And replace the null value with 0 because we don't support null. Try it and let me know whether it works. Awesome! Everybody made it until here. This was our first 4-hour lecture in this year. we learned a lot about standalone components. We learned a lot about signals, getting them, writing them, computing them. And now I have a little exercise for you, kind of homework. Next week you are not here in school because you are, I think, at the Johannes Kepler University, right? Exactly. So we see each other in 2 weeks. And up until in 2 weeks, I ask you to choose one of the homeworks mentioned in GitHub, level 2, 3, or 4. Level 1, you cannot do that already because we haven't done that yet. That will be the topic of the next time when we see each other. Then we are going to use signals with arrays. Currently, we just use signals with basic data types, numbers. But using it with arrays is a little bit different. I will show you that one. So level 1 cannot be done yet. Okay? Level 2, 3, and 4 are the interesting one. You can choose one. They become increasingly harder. Okay? Level 2 would mean that I do not want to have fixed 4 elements. So what I want in level 2 is a variable number of digits. So the regular number here, the regular number component, should not have just 4 elements here. It should have a configurable number of digits. So I want to have a second parameter here that specifies how many digits should be displayed. 2 digits, 6 digits, 8 digits. Okay? That is one possibility. You can choose that one. As an alternative, if you want to have a different challenge, maybe a little bit harder, I don't know, then you support decimal points. So what you essentially have to do is you have to conditionally add here decimal points, and from outside the component should be configurable. So I tell that the component display 1 decimal point or 2 decimal points. Got it? That is another one. You do not need to combine them. You can say, okay, I stay with the 4 elements. That's fine. But I just want to have the decimal points. Then you only have 3 digits in front of the decimal point and maybe 1 digit after the decimal point. And if you want to do an extra challenge, feel free to do so. Let's build a 16 segment display. With a 16 segment display, you can display special characters and the whole English alphabet. Lower characters, upper characters. And if you are as old as I am, let's see, then you maybe love Back to the Future. Who has seen the film? Ever seen the film? And guess what? They have this here. Oh, I thought he had a 16 digit here, 16 segment. No, he only has a 7. So we already fixed that one. Yeah, but I think you get the idea, right? So the last one is a 16 segment text display. The 16 segment text display, there is also a ready-made SVG file here on Wikipedia. So you do not need to draw it yourself. You simply take a look at the SVG file. You can take a look at the page source and you will see the different paths. It works very, very similarly. It's harder. It's the hardest challenge in this one, but I know some of you are really into programming, so I wanted to give you different complexity levels. I think level 2 and level 3 are equally complex. Level 4 is more complex, especially because it needs some fiddling around with SVG. Okay? Try it. Give it a try. Do your best try, and that will be your homework until we see each other in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, as I said, we dive into signals with arrays. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for the first week in this new year. I'm looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks and have a lot of fun and an interesting day next week at the university.